Hey everyone, this is James from TDB bringing you another episode. Today I am going to be talking about Pu'erh areas and a couple of my favorites. This was a suggestion in the comment, and for some reason I couldn't find the original comment, so my apologies to the person who commented there and suggested I talk about, I think it was something like my 5 favorite Pu'erh areas and regions. I was like, oh, okay, that's a good idea. And then when I actually sat down to kind of write up my notes of how what I wanted to talk about and how that would go, I quickly realized why this was something that I had not done before. And it's because I thought about how I'm thinking about regions and what I would want to buy. And the reason I think it is not quite, well, how should I put this? I don't take regions to be necessarily the most important thing. That being said, I do have 2 kind of bigger areas that I do kind of look for tea from. And that I do kind of think of the regions and the area that the tea is made from and the material that's there. And so this is going to be a very, very vanilla answer, but I like tea, kind of the big area is from Iwu tea. So, and I'm using a really broad umbrella for that. People will have different definitions of this, but I'm using one of the broader definitions where we're talking about kind of like the 6 famous tea mountains area. So eastern Xishuangbanna, Mhai County. So this encompasses a rather large area, including a lot of subregions and subregions within the regions, villages, etc., etc. And generally speaking, I find that the more specific that the area gets, generally speaking, the less useful it is. For instance, you could have a village called Wangangjai versus Guafangjai versus like Mhai. Those are all more or less kind of Iwu area, greater Iwu area areas. And for me, at least, those don't necessarily mean too different of things. I might slightly take into account like eastern Mhai County versus more of like the central area, which is Mhai. So the eastern area would be Wangangjai and Guafangjai. But I wouldn't necessarily, if I wanted to try those teas, I wouldn't treat Wangangjai any differently than Guafangjai. Some people will say, oh, they have very different characteristics and stuff like that. For me, at least, when we're getting down into the specifics of, oh, we're getting into like this village, which has this very specific taste, I don't care so much about that. I think I'm more interested in kind of like those broad areas, and I don't find kind of painting with such a fine brush to be super helpful when it comes to that. So generally speaking, this is probably why my areas are so big, because yeah, I like blends, I like teas kind of from those different areas, true, but I also just don't find it too helpful to know the very specific village and things like that. I'm also not necessarily someone that's chasing super small productions and things like that, or buying a lot of young tea in general. So those are a couple other reasons why the very, very specific, hyper-specific areas and down to the farmers or even the tree that tea is harvested is uninteresting to me. Another reason could be also like a lot of it ends up being, faked. It's easily faked, and especially when you're coming to a culture that is not Chinese culture, and there's just a lot of different hands that pass through as far as the information that gets passed on to us. Not to say it's all 100% unreliable, but there's certainly some inaccurate misinformation that is out there, and you could point different fingers at different people. But generally speaking, if you get to like these really specific claims, that information may or may not be accurate. For me at least, the Iwu area is something that I really like. So this area is really associated with kind of boutique producers and smaller productions in general. So it's really hard to recommend necessarily specific cakes. Big factories do dabble here, but their productions are not necessarily the norm, I'd say, when it comes to Iwu tea. This is different for the other area that I'm going to talk about. But so as a result, kind of the recommendations that you would get are kind of just, there are different ones for different vendors. So, some people will like Bian Hao or Chen Yuan Hao for Iwu, if you're talking about Taiwanese producers. Other people are okay with kind of the Western-facing vendors, so people like Yunnan Sourcing, White Tea. A lot of vendors will press Iwu tea, and there's varying qualities there. I tend to like it just in general. For me, it's also like the sort of tea I generally prefer to drink aged tea, and it's the tea that I'm okay drinking kind of the youngest So usually in that 7 to 10 year range is kind of like the minimum of like, okay, this is enough aging that I can kind of enjoy this tea and drink it sort of on the more regular compared with other teas, like factory tea, for instance. I would usually prefer to let it age much longer. So yeah, okay, so let's move on to the next area. Okay, so the next area, I originally thought maybe I could subdivide this into different parts or whatever, but in the end I just decided to lump it all together because, that's how I think about areas and stuff. I think about them more broadly than super specifically. So that's Mhai County, and so this is far more associated with factory tea than eastern Xishuangbanna is. This is the western part of Xishuangbanna. So this is like a lot of the material that has made it into dye factory blends over the years. In fact, that's probably one of the best ways to try this type of tea. You can certainly find boutique examples, and a lot of the boutique examples are quite good and representative. So it's not one where it's like, oh, you should just try the factory tea. You should try the factory tea, and you should try the boutique tea in this case. So probably the most stereotypical mountain that people will mention is Bulong. Mhai County compared to the Iwo profile is a little bit more, how should I put it, brash, robust, it's strong. For me at least, I would usually wait a few extra years, even for like if you had a Iwu boutique production and a Mhai County blend boutique production. Generally speaking, I would rather wait, given the same storage, longer to drink the Mhai County production than the Iwu production, which usually has a little bit of a softer, sweeter profile. The Mhai County one is brasher. It can have a really nice aftertaste that is very sweet, but it also has some very strong material that's bitter up front too. It also has some material that is just bitter straight to finish. I'm generally not a fan of that, but I think that's kind of the minority of Mhai County tea. But there's a lot of sub-regions within Mhai County, some of which are more distinct than others. You have like Bulong, Mongsong, Hukai, Bada. Those are rather large mountains just in general. But then you can get sort of hyper-specific again and get down into the villages. Lao Banjong, I think, is a decently sized village, but, there's Banjong in general, which is bigger. So, again, generally speaking, I find the broader regions to be a little more helpful. I'm like, okay, this is a Mhai County blend. That's good to know. That's usually all I need to know. Oh, this is a Bulong tea. That does say a little bit more about them, but I don't necessarily need to know this is 20% Xin Banjong and 30% Hukai or whatever. So, there's definitely kind of a profile to these Mhai County teas. But it's also very associated with blending, probably as a result of kind of the heavy ties to Mhai Tea Factory there. So yeah, this is one of those areas where, unlike the Iwu teas, where I would recommend people just try a variety of kind of boutique cakes, for Mhai teas, I would recommend people try both the factory versions as well as different teas that are made by more boutique vendors. So you can try like a Bulong cake from Yunnan sourcing or whatever YTT is up to. I mean, even though they're so anti-region, you'll occasionally be able to see, okay, this is kind of like a Mhai area tea, or at least it sounds like it. And you can kind of nail it down from there. Okay, so it's pretty far from kind of the original idea of having the 5 favorite areas. But, that's my take on it. That's how I feel about regions and areas. I could have named very specific places, but that's not really how I think about them. So I wanted to honestly represent kind of what I think about regions and what to look out for. So thank you all for tuning in. Let me know how you like this episode. Give it a thumbs up if you did. I will see you all next time. Cheers.